All right, I'm going to start letting people in, Annie, and then we can start. And we are recording.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm just going to take a second, let everyone get situated and get connected, and then we will get started. All right, thank you, everyone. My name is Annie Siegel. I'm the Director of Special Projects at NASW New Jersey, and I'm really excited today about our community conversation on imposter scams and red flags. And we're joined today by Kim and Mark from the Cybercrime Support Network to discuss different types of imposter scams and learn how to recognize some red flags to keep us and our clients safer online. I just wanted to do a few housekeeping items before I turn this over to Kim and Mark. We ask that you keep your mics muted during the duration of this webinar. We will take questions at the end, but just to reduce some of that background noise, if you could keep yourself muted. If you have any clarifying questions or any comments, you can feel free to put those in the chat, or if you're watching us on Facebook, like Jeff said, you can comment them on the post. We will also take more formal questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar, so please keep that in mind with the questions and comments that you ask and say during the presentation. And if you have any trouble seeing or hearing anything during this, you can always leave and come back and we'll let you back in. I would also like to have a big thank you to Spring Point Senior Living, our sponsor for today's webinar. And with that, I will turn that over to you, Mark.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Batchelor. I'm the Vice President of Community-Based Programs here at Cybercrime Support Network. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to talk today, one second, about imposter scams, and then specifically romance scams, which is a subcategory, which is a big issue. So I'm going to go over a little bit about the imposter fraud, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kim Casey, who's going to talk about the imposter scams and what we do here at Cybercrime Support Network to help out. And to give you as social workers resources that can be valuable in your work. I'll just introduce you to who we are. We're a national nonprofit, and our mission is to serve individuals and small businesses impacted by cybercrime. The way we do that is through three methods: helping to recognize cybercrime. Often when people are victimized, they may not know it immediately, or they may not know it ever at all. If you look at something like the Equifax hack, you wouldn't know that happened unless the company came out and said something. And as social workers, it's important that you recognize things that Kim's going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about with red flags if the person that you're working with may be involved in something they don't know about. It's important for you to know so that you can help them. Reporting is also very important. As I'll talk about, a lot of these crimes go underreported for several reasons, but it's very important to do so just to help out law enforcement and people who come after you who are victimized. And recovery. We help people find resources to help them recover their data, recover their sense of normalcy. At times, their money, but as often is the case, money recovery is not always possible. We are funded, like I said, public-privately. So we have some great sponsors and some great partners in Google, Microsoft, some of the big companies you've heard of. But we also get grant funding from the Department of Justice and their Office of Victim of Crime and the Department of Homeland Security. But what we do, Kim and I, work more on community-based programs. So we have three new ones that I'll touch on here. But we're going to talk mostly about the imposter stuff. We do help the military and veteran community by providing them resources and information that helps them recognize scams that are targeted specifically towards active duty military veterans and their families. We're doing so with Craig Newmark Philanthropies and also the Bob Woodruff Foundation to help us reach a greater audience in the military and in the civilian life so that they can recognize these scams. I work with the Cyber at Risk on a program called Secure Together, which is not yet launched, but we're aiming to launch in October. And we're going to pair volunteers with people who may be more at risk cyber-wise. They may not have strong security on their computers or on their accounts. So the volunteer will sit with them and help them walk through the steps of two-factor authentication and privacy settings and other steps that are going to help them be more cyber safe. And then finally, romance scam survivors, which is where Kim's going to dig down into. As social workers, this might be something you encounter. So it's important to know the signs of it, because sometimes people keep this to themselves and they don't want to talk about it. So if you're able to recognize it, you may be able to help and pull them out of that situation. And after doing so, we have resources that can help. So we're very excited to be launching that. But before we talk about cybercrime, we have to talk about what it is, just so we're all on the same page. It's a device. It's two things. It's when a device is the object of a crime. So it's when your computer gets hacked, or the ransomware that we see in the news all the time now, or somebody's doing funny things on your phone. Or if a device or the internet is used to commit a crime. So that can be anything as innocuous as spam mail, or something bad like a credit card skimmer that you find on a gas tank. So those are the two categories that we really talk about when we're talking about this. But let's drill down to New Jersey. According to the IC3, which is the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is where we suggest everybody report a crime if it happens to them. New Jersey ranks number 9 in total victims by state. So that's a lot. Even as a populous state, 9 is pretty high. And New Jersey ranks number 12 in total dollars lost by state. So the victims together lost that much money. But if you drill down into the scams that we're talking about, which typically target older adults, you're ranking number 7 for people age 60 and above in dollars lost. And oh, I'm sorry, there's no number there, but also number 7 in romance scams. So these scams are out there targeting people in New Jersey, and it's taken a lot of money out of their pockets. And if you're working with populations that are working paycheck to paycheck, or are struggling to get housing, to get food, they can't afford to lose even $1. So we want to make sure that we're helping them recognize things that are going to save them money. Here's some more stats for you. This is generally nationwide, not just New Jersey, but age 50 and up, 53% of them reported fraud. And again, age 70 plus had the highest median loss. Typically, that's because as older adults, they have more money to lose. They might have second property. They might have a nest egg or a 401k that's really attractive to crooks. There's $1.2 billion in losses just from the imposter scams we're going to talk about. And nearly half of that was an increase from 2019. So we saw a lot of imposter scams last year, partially in part to the COVID. There are people posing as medical professionals, as agencies that can help, as stores that sell product. And it's just a problem that's getting bigger and bigger. The reason they don't report these crimes, like I said, at first they might be unaware of the crime. If you're getting obnoxious robocalls, many times that counts as a crime. But also, if something happens and your account was hacked and you got a notification and changed your emails, you might shrug it off, say nothing can be done about it, so why report it? And so that's an issue that people don't report. And then also ashamed of being scammed, especially with the romance scams. People don't want to come out and say that happened to them. They're afraid of being stigmatized, or they're just ashamed that it happened. And when these things happen, that 1.2 billion that I showed on the last slide is really just a very small number compared to the overall loss that's going unreported. So the FBI estimates that number is probably in the triple-digit billions in terms of loss nationwide. There are 36 plus cybercrime categories. They range from things, like I said, like spam email, all the way up to homeland security issues, which we don't deal with. But here are some things that you might see as social workers to take note of. People getting entrapped on social media, identity theft, charity scams that we're going to talk about. So imposter scams. Here are the main, there are so many types of imposter scams, but here are the main types that I'm going to talk to you about because they're most prevalent and they're something that are easy to spot once you know what to look for. The family and friends, that happens a lot, again, to older adults, but it can happen to anybody. That's when you'll get a phone call saying, you know, your grandson's been in an accident or your granddaughter's been arrested and we need money right away to get better, to get help or to make bail. And these calls often come when you're least expecting it. And our instinct as loved ones is to help. So often we don't think about, is this legit? Should I be sending money? And that's how they get you. Also, government agencies and police calls. I think a lot of us have gotten those calls from the PBA asking for donations, or the IRS saying that you owe money and the government's going to come and arrest you if you don't pay it. Good rule of thumb is if the police are going to arrest you, they're just going to come do it. They're not going to tell you that they're going to come do it. But any government agency that they imposter to be, like Social Security, the IRS, Medicare, they're never going to call you and ask you private information. They're going to send information through the proper channels. Phony sellers, again, like I said, we saw that a lot during COVID, people putting up fake websites and saying we have cures for COVID or we have low-cost medication. But this also goes for social media, you know, Facebook Marketplace or Etsy, or where I don't want to pick out a site, but the smaller marketplaces you might want to look out for and just verify that they're who they say they are. And fake contests, lottery prizes, those scams have been going on way before computers. You know, I won the lottery and I can't claim the prize. If you pay me this money, you can have, you know, a bigger part of the prize if you claim it for me. And that's still going on, just with a wider net, because online now there's just so many more people to target. So I mentioned some of the red flags, but here's some more. They're going to ask you for gift cards or a wire transfer right away. That's a huge red flag, and it's going to pop up in each one of these things. If you see an ask for a gift card, just hang up the phone or delete the email. Nobody's going to ask for that. And the second that you give that gift card away, if that's a scam, that number is going to be used, that account's going to be wiped, and you're never going to see that money again because it's not going to come back. If they insist that you keep their request for money a secret, we're going to see that in things, including romance scams, where they prey on your sense of doing right by them, which is a sneaky tactic. And a call comes late at night. Like I said, if you get a call late at night that's saying somebody that you love is hurt and needs money, chances are you're going to think a little less clearly about that, because our instinct to help loved ones. Another type of imposter scam is the charity scams. Again, we saw a lot of this during COVID because there's so many people who wanted to reach out and help people who have been impacted. Oftentimes you're going to see non-specific charities. They say, don't you want to help the children or our military, or don't you want to help the dash hounds, not dash hounds, the greyhounds. Here in Florida, we have greyhound charities. Sure, everybody loves children and dogs and respects and loves the military, but unless they're telling you where that money's going, that's a good sign that it's not legitimate. They prey on our want to help others. Again, as social workers, that's something probably ingrained in you to want to do right by people. And also holiday volunteering. You know, this is the middle of the summer, but as we get on in the year to Thanksgiving and Christmas, there are a lot of people looking for money and to capitalize on people's seasonal giving. Some of the red flags here is that the charity, they'll call you and they'll ask you for a donation thank you for a donation you don't remember making. A lot of times, especially with advanced age, if people are afraid of forgetting things, rather than admit that, they're going to say, oh, okay, maybe I'll donate again. And if they're thanking you, then they seem legitimate. They say, oh, well, okay, that's something that I might want to do again. If they pressure you into making a donation, anytime you're feeling pressure, and this goes for offline too, if you have a worker at your house doing an estimate and they're trying to press you to pay right away, that means they're trying to get you not to think about it and not to consider all the factors involved. And again, they want you to donate using cash, gift cards, or wire transfers. They do so because that's the least able to get back. You can always cancel a check or dispute a credit card, but you're not going to get that gift card back. And then as we're segueing into Kim, I'm just going to say the umbrella for romance scams. People find them on social media and on dating sites a lot, because when we go to these sites, we're already predispositioned to be open to somebody approaching us. We're looking for connections. So that's a great way in for people. And on the social media and dating sites, you put a lot of information about yourself, and that's used for bad actors to kind of pick on and say, oh, I love, cats too. We have so much in common. Or, oh, I used to live in Montana. How about that? And in unsolicited texts, sometimes you'll get a text from somebody and it pretends to have known you and say, oh, let's catch up, and I haven't heard from you. And frankly, a lot of people lose or break their phones and don't replace their contacts, and they fall for it. They say, oh, I probably met this person, I don't know. And that texting is immediate. So again, it's pulling on that sense of, I'm going to answer right away and I'm not really thinking about things. So they're going to declare their love after only a few contacts. They're going to ask for money, again, through gift cards, or they're going to cancel or propose plans to meet. I'd love to come see you, but I'm stationed overseas, or I work on an oil rig, or I don't have the money. Can you send me the money? These are all red flags. And I'm going to turn it over to Kim now, and she's going to talk about some of the warning signs here, and then segue into what we're doing to help romance scam victims and what we do in general to help anybody impacted by cybercrime. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. One of the things I'd like to expand on just a little bit before we leave this slide, dating sites. So, back not so many years ago, there maybe were a handful of dating sites that you would put your information into, and you know all the common names. But in the last few years, it's really mushroomed, where there's Facebook dating, there are dozens of dating sites, dating apps. In addition to that, there are fake dating apps and sites, which are state-sponsored in other countries to lure people in to gain their information and hook them up with somebody who's going to swindle them out of money with a fake romance. And so it's not just those handful of sites, these can pop up anywhere. And people say, well, it's Facebook dating, it's safe. Or, I had a friend request from this person and I waited it out and I checked it out. And, they were friends with a couple of my friends. So I figured that they were okay. And then, we just, became friends. And then, over time, it became a romance, or it became a close friendship. And the whole time, the criminal is just grooming the person to gain their trust, to then eventually ask them for either their personal information or financial information, gaining, I've had a sudden accident, or my dog needs emergency surgery. My dog, Sam, the one I'm always sending you pictures of, oh my God, he's my life and I don't know what to do when he needs this surgery. And so they really pull on people's heartstrings, like Mark said, using things that you have in common, or that they've found out about you. Perhaps you're very religious or spiritual, or you like pets, or you have a lot of grandchildren whose pictures you're always posting. So they look for those commonalities and they become like a chameleon, that person that you may be looking for. I'm a widow too. I lost my wife 3 years ago. My wife had cancer too. And so it becomes very intertwined and difficult, and a lot of grooming takes place, so that by the time the ask for the money comes in, they're already on a trusting relationship with this person. In our next slide, we talk about some of the romance red flags. So we talked a little bit about they can groom you and it can go on for a while. They can also, at the very beginning, declare their love after only a few contacts. So that's an immediate red flag. Asking for money before you've really had a relationship with them, often in gift cards or wiring, is another red flag. Repeatedly canceling or postponing plans to meet. This is huge in the romance scam victims we've worked with. No one had met their scammer, or they had tried to set up Skype to have a discussion online, let's say, and, you know, oh, something happened, the connection was bad, all I got was like this staticky kind of snow version of them, and I wasn't really able to see them. So oftentimes they won't even go to those lengths, but sometimes, you know, when the person is skeptical, they'll do something like that. Usually immediately moving them to another platform. So they met on Facebook, but then they might get a message like, oh, my Facebook account was hacked. Do you mind, you know, if we just chat this way? I don't trust Facebook anymore. There's all these scammers on there, and they move them to another platform to pull them away from that social media site or that dating app. In our next slide, we talk about signs to watch for if you suspect that someone you know, whether it be your client, a family member, or a friend, may be involved in a romance scam. And, you know, we talk a lot about this happening to older adults, especially during the isolation of COVID. But in addition, you know, it can happen to anybody. Scammers do like to go after older adults for exactly what Mark stated, which is the fact that they're generally sitting on a retirement nest egg. And scammers know that. So they know that they have in their view, what's a disposable income that they can grab fast. But it does also happen to younger people as well. And so some of the signs to watch for if you think that a client or a loved one is experiencing a romance scam, you know, unusual transfers, wiring, or withdrawals of money. And sometimes the person who is withdrawing that money, you know, the bank will, you know, they're pretty good at noticing these things because they see it happen so often. And the bank might say to the person, you know, you sure you want to do this? You know, this looks like a scam to us. You know, this is what we do. We spot these scams, and that's what this looks like. But oftentimes the person will, you know, will not feel that way. Will say, no, this is, you know, this is a friend of mine. This is somebody I know and trust. But the bank usually notices, usually says something to the person. And then after repeated attempts, if they still feel as though it's going on, they may reach out to local law enforcement or to the FBI, who may contact the person and again say, you know, this is a scam. Here's how we know it is. Here, you know, you're not the only one this person is scammed. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't, because the person has ingrained themselves into the trust of the person that they're attempting to get the money out of. The person can also push away family and friends, be very secretive. In speaking to family members of romance scam victims, they've often said, you know, we suspected something was up because she kept, you know, looking at her phone, but not allowing anyone to see the text that she was getting, or giggling or talking off in the corner. And then when you would ask, you know, who she was talking to, it was clear that it was somebody that she felt romantic about, or that he felt romantic about, because of the way that they were expressing themselves. And yet they would say, oh, nobody, just a friend. So that, you know, that's something to take note of. They talk about a relationship with somebody perhaps, but they've never seen that person, and you've never seen that person. They've never brought them to meet their friends or family. So these are some of the red flags that you might see. In our next slide, talk about the impacts that romance scams are having now. And these impacts are devastating. So many victims of these crimes have higher rates of addiction, mental illness, and suicide. So romance scams are on the rise. 1 in 7 adults in the United States have been targeted by a romance scam. Over 32,000 are the number of victims who've reported. And it's important to note that many victims do not report for either out of embarrassment, or perhaps they haven't told their friends or family. Perhaps it was inheritance that they've gone through and they're afraid to tell their children what's happened. So they don't report. But of those that have reported, $600 million in losses took place in 2020. 600 million of those that reported. So that's a lot of money going to these scammers, many of which are overseas in other countries. In our next slide, I'd like to talk about our romance survivor program. So our peer support program, I will talk a little bit more about how the program works, but our goals for this program are to increase people's knowledge of romance scams and cyber safety issues in general. We want to increase their emotional wellness. As I'm sure you're aware, peer support groups can help people to increase their support system. Talking with others who've experienced the same thing, who they feel comfortable with, helps create a support system and helps with emotional wellness. And we want to increase their ability not to become victimized again, to defend against that re-victimization. Oftentimes people who are scammed once will be re-victimized. Their information that they have now shared with somebody has been shared out to other scammers. And so they try different methods of tricking them again. And they have lists of these people that they sell to other criminals to re-victimize them. Our next slide, our peer support program, we have some great partners. Our funder for this program, which is entirely free to anyone that joins the program, and that's due to our funder, which is FINRA, the Investor Education Foundation of FINRA. So they were established in 2003 by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. And their goal is to empower underserved Americans with knowledge and skills and tools to make sound financial decisions. Our next slide talks about our other partner, Give an Hour. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Give an Hour. They are licensed social workers, licensed counselors, and this organization, it's national, and you can give an hour to causes like ours, who assist people with peer support for romance scams. They also do peer support after like mass shootings and disaster situations. And so licensed social workers give an hour, oftentimes more than that, of their time to provide these free services. And so they are providing us with the licensed social worker for this program. And so our next slide talks a little bit about the program. So we have about 8 to 10 participants per group. The groups last for about 10 weeks, and each session lasts for 1 hour. The beginning portion of each session, the first 10 minutes or so, is based on cyber information that CSN provides. So we present them with different information each week. We do have a lot of it focused on romance scams, but we put in some cyber safety items as well. And the last 45 to 50 minutes is the peer support program with the licensed facilitator guiding that discussion. And the curriculum plan for each session is handed out each week, so that the participants know what each week's session is about. And then they receive resources following that with additional information that they can, videos that they can watch, and also information on well-being, everything from meditation to all kinds of well-being resources as well. So they get a combined mix of resources each week. And they also, all of this is done, through Zoom, which I didn't mention that. And it's a HIPAA compliant Zoom. Nothing is recorded, notes are not taken. So it's very, they have feel like that, and know that they're in a safe environment. Only those participating in the group have been victimized by a romance scam. We do a thorough intake process beforehand to make sure that no scammer would infiltrate the group. In addition to that, we have a private Facebook group set up. Again, the same situation, only those participants are invited into the private Facebook group. And here we're able to continue the discussion with resources, answering their questions, and they're able to continue the relationships that they developed with those in their group. In our next slide, we just discuss our participants. Right now, we are reaching out to law enforcement, FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, Attorney General's offices, victim service providers, people like yourself who may receive a client that is having a romance scam, involved in a romance scam, has been involved in a romance scam, and so that they can provide them with a warm handoff to us. And then we can assist them, explain to them about the program, do the intake call, and hopefully they'll be a good fit for the program. In addition to that, we do have an intake form that I would be happy to share with you all after this presentation for anyone that you might have interested in the program. So our next slide talks about how to do a Google image search. And so this is something, one of the things that we work with the participants in the peer support group about. Oftentimes images are used that aren't the person that you think they are. Sometimes military photos are used, and then the excuse that they're overseas and they're not able to see them in person or through Skype or some other setup. And so we explain to people how to upload that profile picture of the person who might have reached out to you and put it here in the Google reverse image search to see if that image has been used in other scams. And our next slide is an example that was taken from the dark web. It's an example of a scammer's methodology. And I think I would like to read this slide to you as it is, because it really sends chills through you to know that there are people whose job it is to do this, to scam people. So it's called the Tinder Method. And he says, or she says, so I just tried this and it actually makes money, bro. Download Tinder, meet people and have small talk, and persuade people to buy into a meetup. You can catfish on this, or you can use yourself. I did each way and made money. Make sure to tell them to send where to meet to convince them to pay beforehand. Once you receive the money, block the person and repeat this process. Tinder accounts get banned very quickly for inappropriate things. So make sure to use second telephone number to make a new account. So basically this is like an instruction manual. Here's how to do it on Tinder. Get your money and block the person. And so think about that for a minute. Not only has the person lost their money with no recourse, like the emotional devastation of having had a relationship, whether it was a close friendship or romantic relationship, and that person just took your money and blocked you, and that emotional trauma that people suffer after maybe having been groomed for 6 months or a year. And it's horrible, and also having their accounts wiped out. I can tell you, working with romance scam victims, that we have had victims who have lost their entire retirement savings. Or we have had people who've lost almost $1 million, and people who've lost $10,000. But to that person who lost $10,000, that was everything that they had. And then in addition to that, oftentimes when they pull this money out of accounts, they're not even paying taxes on it. They're grabbing it, they're sending it, they're thinking that they're getting it back. And then the IRS is knocking on their door saying, hey, you grabbed out all this money, you owe us, for your taxes. And now they've gone through every penny they have, and they don't have a way to pay back those taxes. And so now they're selling everything that they have to try to pay the IRS. And it's terrible. It's sad. And then when you see this and you see what they put up on the dark web, it's heart-wrenching. And so take a look at our next slide. Something else that we tell our participants, and it's good practice for all of us, is to make sure when you visit websites so that your information isn't stolen, that you're making sure that your website that you're on is secure. It has the lock symbol, or it has the HTTPS. The S is for secure. Be sure to look at that before you put any credit card information into a site. Our next slide talks about our resources that we have available on our website. So we have resources, as you can see, separated up for military and veteran community, resources for children and young adults, and resources for older adults and caregivers. A lot of the items that we talk about in the slide presentation with romance scams are also on this site. In our next slide, we show a sample of one of our short videos, red flags for romance scams, that we also show to our participants. And the next slide shows how someone who has been victimized by a scam, no matter what kind of scam, they can go to our website, click on the icon here that describes the scam that you were victimized by, so we can see that the bottom one from the right in the middle on the left-hand side is imposter scams. So if there was a romance scam, the person would first click on imposter scams, and that would drill down to report the scam. So we do encourage people to report the scam to the dating app or the social media site. We have heard some frustration from participants that they do report oftentimes to Facebook or other sites that this person wasn't real, and sometimes they get a response back, hey, you know, according to us, they are. And that can be frustrating for the person who's been scammed because they know the person is real. But the reporting is still very important. And then on our next slide, we talk about contacting the credit reporting agencies immediately following a romance scam. Putting a temporary freeze on your credit or an alert on your credit is very important. So people who have been victimized by imposter scams and romance scams, oftentimes you've provided some sort of personal information, right? You've given your birthday, you've given maybe an account information, a credit card information, a bank account information, sometimes even your social security number. And if you've been in a confidence scam, a romance scam, a relationship scam of some sort, you've shared a lot of personal information about yourself, your family. You've shared a lot of information. And so what ends up happening is you've also wired money, right? So they've probably got your bank account information. So what ends up happening is they're oftentimes victims of identity theft. They're victims of social media theft. They may be have had their bank accounts hacked. They may have set up a Bitcoin account because the person that they were involved with wanted to set up that Bitcoin account, put the Bitcoins in there, and then the purse was cleaned out. So these are some things that we can assist with. How to use good password protection, changing all of your accounts, putting temporary freezes on your credit. Putting two-factor authentication. I know there sometimes they haven't cleaned out those accounts yet, and by putting two-factor authentication on right away, until they can move everything around, can block it as well. Our next slide talks about some of the great resources we have on our website. Please check it out when you get a chance. There's a lot more on there than just romance scams. There's tons of information that you can share with clients. As we know, the myriad of cybercrimes and scams is enormous. Mark showed that slide that shows how many different types of cyber scams there are out there. And we have some great specific information, again, about romance scams. And before we leave, I'd like to share two things with you. One is to show how easy it could be to fall victim to any type of imposter scam. So our CEO, who is more than thoroughly secure in all of her accounts, received a call from her credit card company. And it was a number that she had plugged into her phone. And so it rings from that contact number. So of course, you think it's real because this is the number I put in my phone when I call my credit card company. And, they proceed to tell her that there was an issue with her account and she needs to verify her number. So of course, even though the number came in correctly, the little red flag goes up. You want me to verify, you tell me what account it is. And so she, that question out, well, tell me what account that is. Well, if you tell me this, and so there was this little back and forth, but what the actual kicker was, is she said, well, I'm going to, hang up and I'm going to call back the bank myself and check on this. And by the way, here's what I do for a living. And I work with the FBI, click. And so, but, she was being extremely thorough, going through every step. And so you could see how easy that would have been if your phone rang from that number that you go to pay your, your card through, or that you've talked to somebody at customer service about. And, you might be busy, you might be distracted. Oh yeah, the last 4 digits of that. Yeah. Oh yes, I'll confirm that for you. And boom, there you go. So just to talk about how easy it is for someone to be, fooled by these scammers. They're good. They're criminals. This is how they make their money. 8 hours a day. Right? We do this, they do that. This next slide, I just wanted to tell you before we close out this presentation, if you don't know, we do a monthly webinar series, and each month, it's a free webinar series. We have great, interesting panel guests. Each month we tackle a different topic. This month's topic is really interesting. It's the Internet of Things. So it's all of those things that none of us think about, right? Our Ring doorbell, our smart refrigerator, our Zumba vacuum, all of these things that connect to our internet at home. And the safety steps and things that you need to be aware of when you start putting these Internet of Thing items into your home, right? So your Ring doorbell is great. It tells you when somebody's there, when a package has gotten dropped off. But what type of safety mechanisms do you need to set up for that Ring doorbell to make sure that it's not also being used to listen in on your conversations in your house, to gather your information when you're on the phone with one of your credit card companies. So fascinating. And so if you're interested in that, please, we'll send the information for the link out following this presentation. But this month's is Wednesday, July 21st at 2 p.m. And our last slide talks a little bit about some of those important resources you might want to keep handy. Our website, which can direct you anywhere you need to go for reporting or recovery aspects, and annual credit report. Very important to keep an eye on your credit report. Remember, it's free to check it. It's 30 seconds to put a freeze on and 30 seconds to lift it. It's something that it's very easy to do, to keep that freeze on, and then, hey, I'm going to apply for a card. Go in 30 seconds, lift it for 24 hours while they check your credit, put it back on again. We have a link here, information for the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is where you go to report. The Identity Theft Resource Center, which is a great site if you've had any type of identity theft and you'd like someone to walk you through that process. They do an excellent job. Federal Trade Commission is just loaded with great information and reporting options there, and AARP's Fraud Watch Network. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you. We are open to take any questions.
Thank you both so much for that presentation. It's such important information to know, particularly because of the vulnerability of a lot of the clients that we work with as social workers. And so knowing what to look out for and how to help our clients look out for things is definitely really helpful. I see there's a question in the chat, but we also have a few other questions that came in. And the first one is, can you share any demographics on who's most likely to be targeted or impacted by these scams?
Sure. Kim, you want to speak to that since you've been working in the romance scam space?
So regarding romance scams, our program is geared more towards older adults, although we don't have a cutoff age limit. And again, I think with romance scams, it tends to be more older adults because of that nest egg. But you know, we do see people who of any age who can become involved in a romance scam. Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
Oh, no, when it's not the older adults, it tends to be the other side of the spectrum, like college age, because they're online all the time and they don't have the filters that we grow up with don't talk to strangers. So they're out there talking to people and letting them in. And sometimes that they don't have as much to lose. That's why the dollar amount that we reported for the older adults is so high. But the frequency is just as common with the younger people sometimes.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I was going to say, I would say on scams in general, imposter scams, it really can happen to anyone. You know, you can just be busy and trying to get through your emails, you know, on your lunch and see what's in there and see something that looked like, you know, a message from your credit card company, and you didn't take the time to hover over that email address to make sure it really was. You clicked on it, boom. And, you know, it's that fast. And we move fast now in this digital age. So it's taking the time to look at something, to think, stop and think before you do it. And like Mark said, probably more prevalent with young people who are like, oh, they have an app for that. Oh, they have a way I can do that. Oh, and they're like downloading and chatting and doing things that we might say, wait a minute, you know, we might think twice. So yeah, I would say that the two sides, like Mark said, the two ends of the spectrum.
We have a question in the chat that I think is a bit of a follow-up for that. And, you know, someone was asking if you have any resources for vulnerable and marginalized populations who are vulnerable due to their race, sexuality, immigration status, etc.
Yeah, fightcybercrime.org has resources for everybody. We have what's called the cybercrime, what is it? The CRC, the resource catalog, that's it. And it's just a drop-down menu. It's brand new. It's just a drop-down menu, so you can do the search that Kim explained, but by type. And pretty much those resources are for everybody. They're depending on what type of crime there is in terms of marginalized populations. If it's something like bullying, you might see a little bit more for student age or for LGBTQ, things like that, but they're in there. We also can do presentations like ours to any group that you like and find the stats for that population. Although I'm finding for some populations, like people with disabilities, there aren't a lot of good stats out there. So the work we're doing is also looking at this data that comes in on our website and the people we talk to and seeing where those holes are so we can address those populations and kind of get them the help they need.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you were saying, where a lot of people don't report it due to maybe the shame factor, which makes it harder to prevent it when you don't know where and when and to who it's happening.
Exactly.
Are there any legal remedies that can be taken to try to eliminate these types of scams, like preventing robocalling or other unsolicited phone calls to eliminate the phone versions of these scams?
That one might go to Cindy, who's joining us.
Yeah, I'm Cindy Liebes. I'm the Chief Program Officer, but I came to CSN from the Federal Trade Commission. I worked there for 35 years. And yes, robocalls and those types of calls are very difficult. I do know that most of the technology companies, including the phone service providers, have implemented measures to at least notify us when there is a scam likely. I know on my cell phone, for example, now I see scam likely or unwanted call and those types of things, notifying me when a number is being used that has been told to them is likely being used as a scam. Other ways are to sign up for the do not call registry, but as most of us or most of folks complain, the do not call registry, both the national ones and the statewide ones, often don't stop calls from fraudulent marketers. So they don't really care that your name was, or your number was on the do not call registry. One thing we also hear a lot of people say that they do, they never answer their cell phone if they don't know who's calling them. And unfortunately, that puts the onus back on us. But those are some ways to maybe stop robocalls. One of the things that also helps is if you don't get involved with a scam artist, your name or number probably will not be on those lists, because oftentimes once you're on a targeted list, they keep calling you because they assume that you are somehow more vulnerable to listening to what they have to say.
I think another thing that we can let people know, I oftentimes will say this when I'm speaking to older adults. If you're home a lot, that home phone, it just rings incessantly with scam calls. And I do ask them to try not to answer it. Because once you answer that call, your number is marked as a live number. So now your calls are going to keep increasing. Every time you pick it up, they just get sold and sold and sold as a live line. If you don't pick it up, it'll be a pain at first, but over time, your phone won't ring much at all. And so I do advise people to do that in order to stop the constant ringing of the phone. You know, if it's somebody important, let it go to voicemail and call them back.
The one thing I think I did see within the past week or so is now the FCC has put a new law into effect that it's putting an onus back now on the telephone companies, where they actually have to make sure that it's a legitimate number and not a spoofed number in order for it to even to go through to your cell phone. So that finally someone is doing something a little more proactive than leaving it on us as the consumer.
That's great. That's great. And that's what we need. Sometimes laws lag behind technology. And so it's up to the corporation sometimes to step in there and actually do the work. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer and for providing that context with the FCC. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to raise your hand or also put them in the chat. But, you know, Jeff and I were just talking about a situation that we had at our job where we were sent an email about a secure fax message, and clicked on it, and it had you log in to your email to see it, and it ended up being a phishing email, and they got into our email and started sending a bunch of emails to people, but also set up inbox rules so that we didn't know that that was happening. We were able to catch it pretty quickly, but you know, it's so interesting because I mean, I never received faxes, but I was actually expecting a fax that morning, which is why that didn't like trigger oh, that's weird, I don't know why I'm receiving this email sort of thing. So, you know, I think that might have just been a coincidence, but, you know, even somebody, I consider myself pretty tech savvy, you know, this can happen. Luckily, we were able to catch it quickly, but, you know, it could have been a lot worse.
I mean, and we just went through it here at the organization that I work through, multi-factor authentication. At this point, it's a no-brainer. You know, it has to, without that contact that you give or that second follow-up cell phone or email, they do not have access to no matter what they have. And so I can't stress it enough. We just went through with 80 employees, put them all on multi-factor authentication. So it's something I do personally as well. All my bank accounts, my social security, everything has a multi-factor on it at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you look at all of these big breaches that, you know, we hear about in the news. And what does it always come down to? It comes down to somebody used the same password over and over again, or they didn't use their multi-factor authentication. And so I think we could stop a lot of this just by being aware and doing those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in particular as practitioners, you know, you're vulnerable for a different reason in that you have PHI on your computer, protected health information. So, you know, it's your clients are vulnerable, but so is your computer system. So it's something that we all can benefit from.
Absolutely. And more insurance companies that are protecting for any of those cyber crimes are now requiring, or at least making you acknowledge that multi-factor is something that they want to see. opposite. We're going to see more now from the insurance companies where they're not even going to touch organizations unless they have the property security set up.
I see we did have one question in the chat. Maybe this should be the last question. Are password managers useful, and are there any that you all can recommend?
They are useful. We use them here at CSN as long as you remember your main password, of course. But they're very handy. We don't recommend specific products, but some of the bigger ones are worth their money. Basically, you get what you pay for if you're looking for something free when it comes to your security. Without recommending anything, we use Keeper on ours, and we seem to do okay.
Yeah, and one more thing I'd like to add, it's okay to have the password manager create the password if you want. But we recommend, if you do create your own password, making it as long as possible, making it a phrase, and then taking out certain letters and making them numbers. So a phrase that you can remember, like, I like rainy days, but mixing those letters up in there with the @ sign, maybe the number 3 for an E, maybe adding an exclamation point on the end, but something that you can remember that's a long phrase. In addition to that, something that not everybody does, when you get, whether you have Verizon or Cox or whatever you have for your internet provider, oftentimes they'll come with their own password. Anytime you get anything that has its own password that already came with it, even if it's like your vacuum that, for your house, your Zumba or your, Dbot vacuum, change that password. Don't keep the one that was given to you by the vendor. It's just, it's a good practice to always change it when you get the item.
Thank you so much for those tips. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. If anybody else has any last minute, you can feel free to pop those in there. But otherwise, thank you so much, Mark, Kim, and Cindy as well, for giving us this really important presentation from the Cybercrime Network.
Thanks for inviting us. And thanks for the work you all do.
Thank you. And as I had said, everyone, this was recorded, so it is going to be available both on our Facebook and I believe on our YouTube page as well. Otherwise, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. And thank you again to our sponsor, Spring Point Senior Living, for sponsoring this conversation today. And one last question. Are you going to be sharing your slides with us so that we can provide them to the attendees?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And so we will send those out to those who have attended as well.
And that will also include the link for the Internet of Things presentation?
Yes. Everything in there should be clickable.
Outstanding, thank you.
All right, thanks for asking.
All right, I hope everyone has a dry rest of the day and week. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.